research. And there were a lot of things that didn't quite make sense to me about the story. First of all was the blatantly bold abduction right from her very bedroom. The fact that her father, Ed Smart, instantly became a media sensation, despite the fact he had really no media background. The fact that 6 months later she was found still alive. And I started to do some pretty intense research. And as I was going along, every step of the way, light bulbs started to go off. What didn't make sense all of a sudden made sense. And I'll never forget the heat I took 9 years ago when in my daily devotional, I laid out the real story behind the Elizabeth Smart kidnapping. I told people what was really going on, that the media either ignorantly never understood or complicitly didn't have the guts to talk about. I did, and of course I took incredible heat for it. I was labeled as insensitive and just a mean-spirited person. It was also my first run-in with a man who was on the radio at that time by the name of Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck emailed me personally 9 years ago as he read my account of the Elizabeth Smart case. And he was very nasty in his email. He was very upset over what I had said. And I had responded to Beck's email with a simple offer. I'll come on your radio show and we can discuss this. You can pick apart what I've said, word by word. You can challenge everything I've said. I'm more than happy to put myself in that position. He agreed. Yet, 2 days later, I was contacted by someone from his staff saying that Mr. Beck had decided not to put me on his program. You see, Mr. Beck at that time didn't want the truth of the Elizabeth Smart case being broadcast nationally. Because the truth of the Elizabeth Smart case, to understand what happened to Elizabeth Smart 9 years ago, you have got to understand the Mormon cult of which Glenn Beck is part of. Let me share with you the details of what happened to Elizabeth Smart, and then let me put the Mormon film on top of it. And as I do, you will understand not only what happened, but how it happened, and most important, why it happened. What most people don't understand is that in Utah, Arizona to some extent, Idaho, in those western states, you have a high concentration of Mormons. People who follow the satanic Mormon cult founded by a man named Joseph Smith 200 years ago, a cult that deceives people into thinking they're Christians, when the fact is, if you study Mormon theology, a Mormon's no more a Christian than a Muslim is. It is absolutely biblically inconsistent with Christian doctrine. Well, in those Mormon concentrated states, you still have a lot of polygamy going on. You ever watch Big Love on HBO? Mormon cult doesn't like that program because it very accurately depicts what still exists today. Now, over 100 years ago, the headquarters of Mormonism in Salt Lake City, their elders, had to change their stance on polygamy. You see, when Joseph Smith founded this cult 200 years ago, polygamy was part of the cult. You could have as many wives as you wanted. He used the excuse of Abraham and other biblical heroes of the faith who, by the way, were violating God's plan for marriage by what they did, and they all paid a big price. But Joseph Smith introduced polygamy into his cult, and not just polygamy, but it could be with girls as young as 7, 8, 9 years old. It's funny how these cults and false religions have a common thread. If you remember, one of the common threads the Mormon cult shares with Islam is this whole polygamous idea. Not just that, but the fact that you can have sex with children. Well, 100 years ago, as they tried to make the cult more mainstream, more palatable to the country, they realized that the polygamy part of Mormonism had to go because it's against the law. Well, a lot of Mormons didn't want to give up their 12 wives, especially their 10, 11-year-old child brides. So there were some splinter groups, but it was still all Mormonism. It was just the polygamists versus the non-polygamists in the main cult. Then, of course, as years went on, a lot of them got a little more clever, and they said, well, have your wife legally, and then you can have your spiritual wives. Because technically, if you want to have 15 women in your house and have children with all those women, there's nothing against the law. There's a law against having more than one wife at one time. But if you're only married to one of them and the other 14 are spiritual wives, there's nothing legally against there's nothing against the law to that. And that's how a lot of the Mormon cult members operate today. They'll take a legal wife and then they'll have the other 5, 6, 7 as spiritual wives, where they get into trouble, as Jeffs did a few years ago. If you remember that case, another Mormon, even though they just denounced him, his teachings, followings were all Mormonism. The only problem is when you start taking those wives when they're 15, 14. But true Mormons, like Joseph Smith, the founder, there's nothing wrong with that because he was not only a polygamist, but he was a pedophile too. I think his youngest wife was 12. I don't know what your definition of pedophilia is, but that's mine. I think any insane person's. Well, the man that abducted Elizabeth Smart 9 years ago, Mitchell, the bearded one, the wild-looking one. Of course, he hadn't shaved in 9 years, so of course he looks like a wild animal. He was a Mormon. Now, of course, they said, well, he was excommunicated. The only reason he's excommunicated is because he followed the traditional Mormon practices of polygamy. He had a wife, he had a couple other wives, and like all Mormons, he wanted a child wife. He had done some work at the Smart home, had his eyes on Elizabeth, came in one night in the middle of the night, abducted her, took her away. Now, let me just say this. It is horrible that any person, especially a 14-year-old girl, has to suffer the horrors of what she did. Because what happened to her is she was taken as a bride of Mitchell. And of course, that marriage was consummated, which means he raped her over and over during the 6 months that he had held her against her will. Although at some point it really wasn't against her will. This is what people don't understand. Because Mitchell, of course, claimed to be a prophet of God. Now, Elizabeth Smart grew up in a Mormon home. And here's another part of the story the media never told you. Her father, Ed Smart, was a bishop in the Mormon cult. Well, the Mormon cult has tremendous media holdings, and it was through his cult that he was able to garner such media attention. Never talking once about his Mormonism, like all Mormons, deceiving people when he talked about God and Jesus. Most people ignorantly not understanding the God and Jesus in Mormonism is not the God and Jesus of the Bible. That part of the story was never told. What happened simply was, even though hundreds of girls are abducted, young teenage girls in those states, most of them are from poor homes, and it's never reported. Nothing's ever done about it. Unfortunately, this was the daughter of a Mormon bishop, and that's why it got such national attention. But Elizabeth Smart, growing up in a Mormon home, learned to respect the prophet. And I'm sure at some point she accepted her fate because, again, this is the fate of a Mormon woman, to become the wife of a prophet. There's no greater honor. That's why, despite many opportunities, she never escaped. Of course, 6 months later, she was found. She wouldn't even admit who she was until finally she was whisked away, and the whole thing, of course, became this great, wonderful story because she was found alive. And it was great in that respect. But I wrote at that time that this man would either never come to trial because he would be found insane. Because don't forget, the Mormons run the legal system. The whole judicial system of Utah is run by Mormons. So they kept him locked up for 9 years. Now, 9 years later, they're parading him out. And he's either going to be convicted or he's going to be found insane. And technically all the I's have been dotted, all the T's will be crossed and be put away forever. And this whole thing will be over. They've swept it under the rug. And never once did the real story of this whole sordid episode ever come out, because the Mormon cult locked it down and wouldn't let people really know what happened. Elizabeth Smart's not the only 14-year-old girl that's been abducted. Happens all the time by Mormon cult members. This is what their cult teaches. This is what they believe. This is what they do. That's the real story of Elizabeth Smart. I feel so sorry for her. I pray that God will minister to her and help her heal, and I also pray that God will lead her out of that cult, because those who follow those teachings will die and go to hell. I'll be right back after this break. I'm Bill Keller of LivePrayer, and I need your help. God has challenged me to open the 9/11 Christian Center at Ground Zero. This is a response to the new mosque that's being built within a block of the World Trade Center towers used to stand. The Muslims are spending $110 million to build this mosque. God said to me to go put a Christian center within a block of Ground Zero, and that's what we're doing. We're going to open this center on Sunday, September 5th. I'll be flying personally to New York to hold those services every Sunday till the end of the year. And then starting January 1st, the center will literally be open 24/7. We'll hold evangelistic services there every day. We'll have a special 9/11 memorial prayer room so that those who come to New York City to visit that hallowed ground will have a place to come and meditate, pray, just spend some quiet time. This is a great undertaking. I can't do this alone. I need your help. To give a gift to the 9/11 Christian Center, you can go to LivePrayer.com. Click on the donation link on the left menu bar. There you will find a secure server so you can make a gift with your major credit card, or you can give via PayPal. Or if you want to just drop a check to us, that's great. You can send that to our headquarters in St. Petersburg, Florida. That address is on your screen. In the information line of your check, just put 9/11 Christian Center, and your gift will go to this great undertaking. Islam is a 1,400-year-old lie from hell. The audacity of the Muslims to build a center in the shadows of where the Trade Center towers that their Muslim brothers knocked down, killing 3,000 innocent people, is a travesty. People are upset. I'm upset, but we're taking action. Sunday, September 5th, we will put our faith to the test as we open the 9/11 Christian Center at Ground Zero. And welcome back to Live Prayer. You know, my email address is on the screen every day because I love you and I care about you so much, and I want to stand with you in your time of need. Please email me if I can help you in any way. You know, we've talked about Mormonism a little bit today. On Friday's program, it's one you don't want to miss. We're going to talk about the spiritual puppet master himself, Glenn Beck, the one who's helping to lead countless millions of souls to hell through the false teachings of Mormonism under the guise of being this great patriot, the man who's helping save the Union. But again, people don't know what the real story is, but you will Friday. Don't miss it. Love you, care about you so much. Be a blessing today to someone. See you tomorrow.